Running Sentences presents The Train Headed Nowhere. Part 3. Bruises and Problems. Things aren't going well for Drex, as he wishes he'd never learned to ask questions. Sadly, it seems that now that he knows things, he's going to learn even more. This story is written and narrated by Michael Honnery. It is a work of fiction, so any names, characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real situations, characters, businesses, events, and/or fictional ones is purely coincidental. Copyright 2024, Michael Honnery. All rights reserved. This supply room that was acting as Lewis's office had gone pitch black, but Drex was sure that his fist had somehow at least connected with something. It felt soft to hit and a bit pliable as he withdrew his hand. His problem, though, was it felt like it hadn't made as much of an impact as he would like, and now this man might have a weapon of some sort in their hands. "You better not try anything else, Mr. Lewis." He was entirely unsure of himself as he said this, with the hope that he sounded hard, but not knowing what that sounded like. "You think you can beat me up?" "Well, I can make you come along with me." "Why do you even bother with these fools?" "And so I can go back to being left alone if I do?" Drex offered, though he wasn't really sure entirely himself. The light had come back on, revealing that Lewis was where he'd last been, but with no weapon. Drex couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief at that. "I will never go along with you," Lewis said. It took a moment of looking to realize where he'd struck the man with his fist. The jaw flapped a bit, looking a bit looser than it had before on the man. Guessing that's where he connected his punch, he prepared to throw another. "You don't have a choice." "You said I did have one," Lewis countered. "Well, it's better to go along with things than to try and figure out a way around them." Lewis, though, made a break for the door, which caught Drex by surprise. He'd expected something and was ready to throw another punch, but not that ready. His fist lazily flew past the jaw, letting Lewis bowl right on by. "Sucker, you'll never take me." "Why?" Drex asked. "Because I can escape and do better things. Free!" The suspect was then out the door and slammed it shut behind him. Drex, who'd been a bit off balance, recovered himself, and then went for the door as well as he growled to himself. He wonders why this couldn't have just been done the easy way. Why the fight? The boss hadn't actually said anything bad aside from the threats to him, so why was Lewis acting this way? Taking off after the man was no problem, but the chase was a short one. At the gap between the next car and this one, Lewis came to a stop halfway across. There was a distance of about a couple of feet between them, which Drex saw as he opened the door. He figured this was to keep workers and passengers separated into this next area, as the narrow walkway was a bit longer than usual. On the far end, where the passengers' first car stood, a mean-looking, bulky woman wielded a shotgun-like device, and it was aimed towards Lewis. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Cross, and I'm so glad you could be here," the woman said. "What is this?" Lewis protested. "The end of a little adventure in business that was ruining the passenger's trip. What else would this be? And thank you, Mr. Drex, you are excused," the woman announced with a heavy, heavy glare towards both of them. Drex eyed the situation. He started to say. "Go make your report to the boss." Since there was a shotgun between them, and there would be no answers to the questions he had, and that was going to nag at him, he decided to just accept this. Still, he stepped back and closed the door, and paused for a moment, sort of expecting to hear the shotgun go off, but thankfully no noise came, and so he was at least satisfied that maybe things would get sorted out as he moved off. After making his report to the boss, who nodded along and then just waved him away, Drex found himself back in the office hallway. His mind was lost in a clatter of all that had happened as he walked away, running straight into Domina. "Your job is done, then?" "Huh? Oh, yes, I guess." Good. I need you for something else," she said simply, and then pointed off down the hallway where they needed to go. "What? I need to go get some food and rest." "Don't worry about that for now. You're needed and you will be used." Shaking his head and taking a few steps back, he looked tiredly at Domina, who snapped her fingers in front of his face. Drex shook his head and took a further few steps back so he wasn't so close. "I don't want to." "Yes, you do. I need you to get close to Lucy in the dining car. She's up to something and we need to know what it is," Domina ordered. Pausing at this request, Drex blinked and thought about the young lady. She didn't appear to be the type who would do anything out of line, if ever. What could possibly cause her to go against the grain? It didn't sound right in his head. "Are you sure you have that right? And why can't you do it?" he asked her. "Well, everyone's suspicious of the higher-ups, including me, and once they see me, they shut up." "Yeah, but if I keep taking these jobs from you lot, they'll suspect something from me as well." Domina had grabbed him by the arm and led him towards the end of the hallway where the stairs downward were. Her grip was as firm as they come to a stop at the stairs. "Well, you will have to deal with that. There is no other choice, since you might be part of a resistance on the train." His mind swirled at that idea, since it didn't make any sense to him. Resistance aboard the train? Why? How? Was this train part of some sort of big plan by the government, or was it being used by the resistance, or what was going on? "I don't understand what you mean," Drex said slowly. He then turned to look and realized that Domina had vanished back towards her office, leaving him alone with more than a few questions. He took a step to get away from all of this and looked at his watch. To his disappointment, it would only be a matter of a few hours before his shift began driving the train. He found himself sitting at the bar in the employee dining car, his mind occupied by what had been asked of him. It was getting hard to concentrate with all the questions and the things that had happened to him. He barely noticed the drink being put in front of him. "You look tired today. Something wrong?" Lucy asked. "What? Oh, I had a lot of work to do, chasing things down." "Really? Driving the train is that hard?" "Among many other things, it isn't actually that hard, but the bosses keep asking things of me that aren't exactly involved in that, and I do mean the higher-up ones beyond, Carl." "Well, they always get what they want," Lucy said with a shrug of, "oh well." "Yeah, they do. You ever hear of Lewis Cross, by the way?" Lucy pauses for a moment in front of him as he finally began concentrating on what was in front of him instead of staring off into the distance. It was Lucy there, standing in her usual uniform with an apron to protect against spilling stuff on herself. Their eyes met for a second, and she gave him a warm smile along with a headshake. "Heard of him? Yes, but I don't know him. Why?" "Oh, he got himself into trouble, which seems to be spreading around the workers in the train." There was a soft nod, yes, to that, but she moved off to take care of another customer. Drex was thankful for the opportunity to think about things alone for the moment. It didn't make any sense in his mind why Lucy, who by all accounts seemed to just like work, might be so revolutionary. None of this made any sense. "Did you go chasing after Lewis?" Lucy was back, catching him off guard and not ready for anything. A glance up to her made him shake his head no. "Yes and no, sort of. How did you—" Well, workers come through here after their shifts. You managed to become well known in the supply car when the workers there came back?" "Oh," Drex said a little unhappily. "So what did he do?" He grimaces at the thought of trying to answer that question. Was there even an answer? "I don't actually know. Selling supplies to customers and employees, I think. The boss has asked me to go get him and then, and bring him to them. But he'd been ignoring their summons to talk to them, so that's basically all I know." "Whatever it is, it must have been bad then, right?" she said, but didn't sound convinced. Offering a shrug, Drex quickly drank his drink and grabbed up the wrapped sandwich he hadn't touched yet and had at some point ordered. "Well, I have to get to some work, so I'll see you later." Hurriedly getting up and heading to the front engine, Drex found himself questioning why she was so curious about this. It couldn't be that she was pumping him for information, could she? He put that behind him as he charged to the one thing he knew he could do without questions: drive the train. Entering the engine compartment, Drex sighs as he looks up to the control panel. There were quite a few lights lit up on it, and Petunia sat there with her legs up, fully asleep at the job. He had much the same thought of doing such things during his shift, since he had yet to get a rest. Ahem, Petunia? She jolts up, looking worriedly, then relaxes when she sees who it is. "My shift's over?" Petunia asks. "Fortunately for you, unfortunate for me." "You all right? You don't look well." "Long night and no chance to sleep." "How? All we ever do is work, eat, and sleep," Petunia said rather curiously. "The bosses have gotten a hold of me and want me to do things that don't involve driving a train, sleeping, or eating all that much." Her eyes went wide as she got up and out of the driver's seat. "What did you get yourself involved in?" "Nothing that I'm aware of, Petunia. I asked questions, got no answers, and now I have to do tasks for them." "Well, if that's the case, I would rather not know anything, thank you. I don't want to be forced to do other jobs along with this one. I'm already mind-numbingly bored as is." With a shrug, he steps to the side so that she could get past and out the car. He wasn't about to stop her, as he didn't think it would accomplish anything. Though the thought ran through him that he probably shouldn't have told her about the bosses. With the slumped shoulders, he eventually got into the driver's seat and checked things over. Why does no one deal with flashing lights? After a few moments of dealing with things and looking over the maps given to him by the bosses that showed only the certain track areas that he would be covering that shift, he settled deeper into his seat. It was way too comfy for what was supposed to be utilitarian work. Figuring it was exhaustion playing on him, he merely sat back and set an alarm on the console. Its shrill ring would wake him up 3 hours later, jolting him upright into an overly dark room. Fuck, that was too short. "Who are you talking to?" Drex froze up at the sound of his boss, Carl's voice. "Myself, sir." "Okay, then what was too short?" "Our allotted nap time during our shift, sir." It was an outright lie that should not even remotely be bought, but it was his only hope at the moment. It also was out of his mouth before he could think. "Whose orders gave you the right for a nap?" "Domina. She gave the okay since I've been working with her on more than a few things." "Then it's just a you thing, is it?" Not entirely sure on that front. You would have to ask her. I have work to do." Having not bothered to turn around and talk to his boss during this entire conversation, Drex was busy pretending to scan the panel before him. All looked okay except for the one blinking light. He had no idea what that could mean, though, since it was an unmarked one, which was unusual. His hands went for the guidebook and soon had him flipping through the pages. Our conversation isn't done yet, mister, his boss, Carl, growled. Feel free to keep talking, then. I'm concentrating on my job. You weren't doing your job a minute ago, and for that you're about to be written up. You are going to get written up. That's okay by me. Do I have to go back to the back of the train, or... Drex was about to shut the book and unbuckle himself from the seat. The thought had come over him that Carl really wasn't about to do anything to him, not with only 3 drivers, and bringing it down to 2 might be pushing things too far for this train and its running. Finish your shift and report to my office. We will discuss and figure things out from there. Drex nods along, not listening, as he found the page he wanted. The blinking light represented a low fluid warning for the wipers to the windows. There was a moment's consideration of what to do, since he wasn't sure he had any of that fluid, then remembered that they did. He unbuckled himself and slid out of his seat, and twisted around the compartment itself. Thankfully, Carl had left, which made getting to the work locker, set up against the wall, easier. Inside was a bunch of tools and other quick fixes. Now, where was that liquid, and where do I pour it into? A few minutes rummaging led to a finding of the stuff, and a few more pages flipped got him to a little twist top on top of the control panel. Ever so carefully, he filled it up, trying not to spill any, but got a bit here and there as the engine swayed from taking corners and straightening up again. Job done. Now there is only several more hours to go before I get off and get some rest. Probably won't get any rest, though. Night rolled around, but even then, it was a bit of time before his relief showed up. All too quickly, Drex had gotten out of the engine car and headed back to the offices. He now stood tiredly in front of the office doors for Carl and knocked on it. There was no reply, nor did the door open. Carl, it's your subordinate Drex. You asked to see me after my shift?" Still no reply. He wondered if he should try the door handle. That might potentially lead to questions, which he'd grown increasingly wary of the last few days. "Boss?" Unsure of what to do or if he could leave, Drex stood there for a moment more. Panic going through his body, since the right thing to do was to check to make sure that things were okay. But that could lead to bad places with questions, which his mind was already warning him against. "I'm coming to make sure you're all right," he said out loud, trying to do something. His hand jiggled the doorknob, trying to get it to open as it twisted in his hand, but pushing or pulling on the door did not get it to open. "Well, I can't get to you, so if there's something wrong, can you send me a message of some sort, or some sign that you're okay or not?" Stepping back from the door, he waited a moment and almost didn't catch the sight of something slipping through the bottom of the doorway. A piece of white paper now lay on the floor, which he was quick to pick up and unfold. "I'm fine, leave me alone." He read the message a few more times and stared at the words to see if there was anything he was missing. Deciding that he should take this message at face value, he just about stepped away when he bumped into Lucy, who gave a yelp, surprised herself. "Ack!" "Oh, sorry, so sorry, I didn't see you there," he tried to explain to Lucy. She took a moment to recognize him, but then offered a smile. "Oh, no big deal. It happens to the best of us, and thankfully I wasn't carrying any food or drink today." "Right, good. I should go," he said as he began edging away. "What is that in your hands, by the way?" It's a note from my boss, after he called me up here." "Well, that's weird. Why a note? And did he call you for something?" "Oh, yes, he wanted to see me about work, but I guess that's now unnecessary. It's probably just me getting yelled at tomorrow. What are you doing in here? What's with the questions?" he asked after a moment of thinking about it. "Me? Oh, I got called up by Domina, who said there was something suspicious going on." "Oh." Drex decided he really didn't like the sound of that, but tried to keep himself sounding normal, but really, with the way that O had come out, didn't work. Yeah, no idea what it is about, but that is the way with these bosses. I'll see you later. She had already begun walking away and waving her hand as she said this. He offered a wave back and watched her go, severely conflicted about all of this. Then he turned and headed out for the much-needed sleep. The bedroom was a great sight for Drex as he entered, and spotted Petunia. He sighed and stretched out as he sat down on one of the chairs to get out of his clothes. "Anything interesting going on?" she asked. He looked up to her as he took off his shoes. "You don't really care about things, do you?" "You're right, I don't care much. I was making conversation since it's the polite thing to do, and, well, I am an engineer and I run the train, so maybe it helps if something bad happens so that I know about it." "Great. So nice for you. But other than what I told you about earlier, there isn't much of anything going on." "About earlier?" "You don't want to be involved since it meant asking questions." Yeah, but now I'm curious because, despite everything, I still hear things." He looked up and stared at her as worry and dread filled him. There was no way he could take responsibility for what was going on with her, but if he told her things, then responsibility would come to him. And now, with her curiosity, he was sure it was all going to be blamed on him. "I think you should probably stop there. Save yourself the trouble of thinking about what's going on and what you want to know." "Well, it's too late. I already asked questions and learned some stuff," she replied. He looked at her even harder, trying to figure out what and where this was going. "What did you learn?" "Revolutionaries are reportedly among the passengers." Shaking his head at that, Drex wondered how true it might be. It didn't feel like it was possible for anyone to know anything about the passengers from up here in the employees' compartments. The workers that took care of them were cut off from the rest of the train, though Lewis seemed to have some connections that he wasn't supposed to have, so maybe that wasn't true. "Are you planning to keep this news that you found out a secret from the bosses?" "Got to. My sources aren't the most reliable of people." "Do I dare ask who they happen to be?" "Carl is one of them." The name froze Drex for a moment, as he looked carefully at Petunia, eyes locking onto her eyes. Did she really say the name of their boss? There was probably other Carls who were workers aboard the train, but he was not aware of them or knew of them, and he doubted that she knew any of them either. "You mean—" "The only one we know." Drex pulls out a note from his pocket and held it up. "I went to see him since I pissed him off by falling asleep. The door to his office was locked, and then this slipped under it when I called to him." "Well, that's weird and strange. He had a rather loose tongue in the dining car." "Talking to Lucy, of all people, Petunia?" "Everyone talks to her. What's your note say?" Drex read it aloud to her, then stuffed it back into his pocket. "Either none of this makes sense, or the bosses are playing with pawns to get to revolutionaries." "If that's the case, then I'm back to being bored with it all. That is not interesting," Petunia declared. "Well, good, actually. Keep it that way if you can. Don't get involved." She shook her head as he finished getting his shoes off and then grabbed some pajamas and disappeared into the nearby restroom. When he returned, she had left, and he went right to sleep on his bed. Waking up earlier than anticipated, Drex stretched, got dressed, and saw that he was still alone in the sleeping compartment. He made his way forward to the dining car to get some food, as his stomach was gurgling at even the slightest of movements. It was almost empty as he sat down at the nearest table and looked about. The place was empty, aside from a few others at spots in the far end of the car. Lucy didn't appear to be around, nor did any of the other dining workers, which made him frown and worry. "Service?" he had called out on the instinct, thinking that it might cause something to happen. There was, however, silence, and he cast his glance over towards the other workers sitting about. They looked over to him, but then away when he met their eyes. "Do any of you know what's going on?" "Why don't you go ask the bosses since you're so close with them?" one of them snarled back at him. "What was that?" There was no response, and none would look at him now. Annoyed, Drex stood up and went over to the counter to see if he could see anyone. It was a clean space behind there, with service for drinks and an odd machine that he figured made the food. There was no sign of anyone or signs of anything out of place, not that he knew what he was looking for. "Mr. Drex." "What is it, Carl?" "You didn't show up at the end of your shift." Yes I did." He was still looking around and not paying attention to his boss as he pulled out the note he'd gotten from his pocket. Idly, he then looked over towards his boss, just a glance, as he held out the note for him, and then sat down on the nearby stool, still trying to figure things out and why there was no one here. "What is this?" "The message passed under your office door when I went to visit after my shift. I couldn't get the door to open, and all I got was that when I asked if everything was okay, so I left," Drex said in defense of himself. "That is no excuse." "Perhaps, but I did hear something interesting the other day, and maybe I heard it wrong." "I don't care about what you find interesting," Carl said. "You should, though, since it involves you and a group who are apparently not supposed to be aboard the train." His boss roughly grabs his arm and pulls him in close to make sure that no one else could hear them. "What are you talking about?" "Revolutionaries," Drex replied with a bit of a smirk. "As I suspected, you're a part of them, aren't you?" "Not me, no. And if I was, then this train would have already stopped? Yeah, no, I don't know. Anyway, people think you are a part of them, and that note probably won't help you out when I try to explain things to the higher-ups." Carl cast a glance again at the note that was still in his hand, and with a snarl stuffed into his pocket. "What note?" Carl said all too triumphantly. "See, I don't think the big bosses or even Domino is going to buy that. They will likely think that I'm in the right, since I've been doing good jobs for them." "No, they won't." Pulling away from Carl's grasp and slipping off of the stool he'd sat down on, Drex offered his boss a smile. "Well, if you say so. All you have to do is ignore that I slept, since nothing bad happened, and all of that goes away." "No, it doesn't, Drex." "Because Lucy is suspected of being one of them as well?" "How do you know that?" Unable to hide the smile now on his face, Drex shrugs. "How do you think I know? It's rather simple. Domina told me to be on the lookout." "How unfortunate for you, then." The sound of Lucy's voice made him stiffen a bit as he looked over his shoulder. "So, are you a revolutionary?" Drex asked with as straight a face as he could offer. "Do you expect me to give you a straight answer?" "It would make things simpler, Miss Lucy, if you did." "Life isn't simple, and Carl here is a traitor." "I am not. I'm an informant." "Good to know," Lucy said. Drex took a step to the side, head swimming as he took in the conversation now going on between these two. He did not want to interfere or risk anyone's wrath when there was a good chance they probably weren't being truthful. This was about the only thing he could do, and took it with aplomb. "This isn't about me anyway, it's about him." Pointy finger from Carl shot towards Drex, who now was sitting down at a nearby table, trying to keep them in his sight. He did eye the finger, but said nothing, and turned his attention to Lucy, who wore an ugly expression on her face. "Who put these ideas into your head, Mr. Drex?" "The bosses did. They wanted to investigate things since they're in crackdown mode, I guess. I believe it's all thanks to that Lewis figure I was talking about earlier." "He was an idiot. But I reiterate that I have no dealings with any revolutionaries," Lucy said as firmly as she could. "Well, that's good. You're up to something, and I don't much care who or what it is. But do go clear it up with Domina, otherwise," Drex said. "Otherwise what?" "Well, I don't think I need to say it, but you'll be off the train, or at the back of it, and pushed off, or something like that. That's the boss's orders." "That's not my orders. I don't do that sort of thing," Carl yelled. "No, it is, Carl. You've threatened me several times with such orders. Don't think you can get away with anything. You're lucky that I don't care about any of this, otherwise I would go report it." Drex waved his hand as he stood up, looking at the food machines behind the bar. "Deal with all of this in your own way. Report it or don't. If I get asked by Domina or any of the higher-ups, I'll tell them what I know, so it might be better to go clear the air about what's going on with them first," Drex offered. "You don't even know what's going on, though." "No, Lucy, but I have a good enough idea that they'll act upon anything I say. Is there someone willing to serve food, or—" Lucy seemed content, ignoring his question about the food. "You're content with not knowing anything about what I've been doing?" Lucy asked. "You could tell me all about it, but I'm not listening. I've already gotten into enough trouble for asking questions and been told to stop. Every time I now try and stop, people want to throw more things at me." She came around the counter and grabbed a hold of his arm, making sure he couldn't get away, and had to look into her eyes. He met them and waited for her to say something. "I have been working with Carl here." "Congratulations, I guess?" "As always, you don't understand, Drex. It's too complicated for his simple mind." "Carl, do not insult me, or I will try and punch you. I've been getting good at punching things." "You're only going to try and punch?" Lucy asked, and raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Well, I'm not sure I can punch well enough to do anything, even though I have been trying more. You were saying something about what you two are up to? Just saying you're working with this one doesn't really mean anything to me." "Our job is to root out those who are sabotaging the train." Drex nods along. He didn't really care, and it sounded like a nice thing to do, but why tell him? Any of the bosses, and would have dismissed him should he ever report on such a thing, as they would already be aware of it. So, this sounded like a lie. "Great. Now what are you really up to? Or if you want, I can walk away now without knowing." Her grip tightens as she looks at him desperately. She certainly seemed to want him to buy what she was saying. "We are working towards the same thing, I believe." "I'm not actually working towards anything, Lucy. I've been used as a messenger by others doing what they want, and seeking information all because I question things." "See? He's useless to us. Don't bother with him, Lucy." Drex glares towards Carl, trying to figure out why he was still around, interjecting like he actually matters. "What do you even bring to any of this, Carl? You've been aloof and said you know about stuff without bringing any proof. How am I supposed to believe in you anymore, or anything that Miss Lucy says?" "I am your superior. That is all that matters." "Not when I'm off shift, you're not. And you gave me the note excusing me from the meeting, which you're now pretending meant nothing. Get out of the way and let me go about my life, or explain yourself to your boss. Or not do anything at all. I don't really care. Just stop bothering me." "I'm ordering you to shut up and never mention anything about what's going on." With the roll of his eyes, Drex mostly ignores Carl and moves to pull his arm away from Lucy's grasp. "Why won't you listen to us?" Lucy protested. "I have no reason to, nor do I want to. This has nothing to do with me. If you'd bother to listen to what I'm saying, you'd already know this. Why won't you listen, Lucy?" "Because this might be a life or death situation." "And you're involving me?" Drex said to Lucy's comment, rather confused. "Yes, you can get the Domina to back her off of us while we do our work and do our thing. We will be the ones getting the revolutionaries for you, so you don't have to do anything." "And follow your orders in the meantime," Carl snapped at him. "Your orders are contrary to what Lucy is asking for. She wants me to talk to people. You don't. Which is it, and what's going on?" "Follow my commands. This is all about a group that is working with the passengers to take over the entire train. It appears to be wrapping up quite a few people." "Okay, that's interesting, I guess. Do you have any proof?" "I can get some within the hour," Lucy said confidently. "Fine. Whatever. Bring it back here, where I will be waiting for someone to serve me some food." She nods and begins heading for the exit to the back of the employee's car. Carl, still glaring at him, backs away to follow Lucy. End of part 3 of The Train Headed Nowhere. Thank you for listening.